Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Pleasure to start our webinar, traditional webinar of our network United for Ukraine. So those who are participating quite often, they know about our network. I will not repeat. This is network of global network of parliamentarians and also of experts. We have quite often making our webinars. And now we have a special webinar with the title Putting Wagner Group on EU terrorist list. So the whole title perhaps says everything about the topic, what we want to discuss. I should remind not what is Wagner Group, because perhaps everybody knows very well, but that the Parliament, European Parliament, had a special discussion on Wagner Group back even before the war. On 25th November 2021, we passed a resolution on that. And also, of course, we spoke on Wagner Group when we were passing resolution on Russia as a state sponsoring terrorism. And of course, our wish and our message to EU institutions was very simple. Besides everything else, what is needed to be done, fight terrorist behavior of Russia, we need to put also Wagner Group on terrorist list. But that is not still done. And so today we have really brilliant group of speakers, experts, politicians from national parliaments, national governments who can initiate some actions, but also really very well-known experts who can perhaps explain us more about not what Wagner Group is doing, but what is the procedures and how we can proceed. I will start first of all from two members of national parliaments, because as always, national parliamentarians are very busy with voting, so it's one reason, but not only because of that, but also because they are really very, very strong in all the actions which are needed to combat Wagner Group legally and politically. And the first speaker will be Kati Piri from Netherlands National Parliament, but very well known for us as former member of European Parliament. Kati, we're missing you, but now it's a pleasure to see you here. So please.
Thank you very much, and it's absolutely likewise. And thank you, of course, for taking the initiative of having this this discussion on, I think, a very timely and very important topic. And I'm sure I've seen the list of speakers of today. There are many, many experts, and of course, also from a legal point of view. Let me focus very shortly in my introductory remarks on my role as a member of the parliament, a member of the Dutch parliament, and how we can proceed to get to the aim, what is the title of this webinar. As you, of course, already mentioned, in November 2022, I think the European Parliament made a very clear resolution where it was already called on the Council to put Wagner on the terrorist list. And we have, of course, seen also across the Atlantic that in both houses of the US Congress, similar calls have been made, and that we have seen that the US administration so far only designated the Wagner Group on as a transnational criminal organization. And as far as I know, the proposed legislation has not moved yet beyond the committee, and the position of the Biden administration is unclear on this topic. Now, I think the European legal status quo is paradoxically, on the one hand, very simple, and on the other hand, confusing at the same time. And I'm sure the legal experts in your panel will elaborate more on that. So we have, on the one hand, the Council's definition of terrorism, which was established just after 9/11 in 2001. And it states that a terrorist act shall mean one of several intentional acts that may seriously damage a country or an international organization and is committed with the aim of, and they have three examples: seriously intimidating a population, The second is unduly compelling a government or an international organization to perform or abstain from performing any act. Or the third, seriously establishing or destroying the fundamental political, constitutional, economic, or social structures of a country or international organization. And I think it's clear that it is beyond any reasonable doubt that the acts of Wagner constitute terrorism under the definition of the Council. However, the challenge that we are facing is that for the Council to adopt the designation of Wagner as a terrorist organization, the so-called judicial authority needs to initiate an investigation into a prosecution of Wagner. And to my knowledge, that has not yet happened anywhere in any of the national countries of the European Union. Nonetheless, national parliaments in Europe are moving forward, and I think this is very important. One of the other speakers in your panel was the one who contacted me as a member of the Dutch Parliament to take the initiative here to call on the Dutch Prime Minister to advocate for a European designation of Wagner as a terrorist entity. And after some wiggling on his side about the differences between the human rights sanctions and the terrorism sanctions regimes, the Parliament by majority approved my motion to explore the options at the European level. So this is also the task given to the Dutch government. And finally, since that motion, however, the only new designation has been, on the one hand, listing of several persons involved in Wagner, and last week putting Wagner as a whole organization on the sanctions list regarding to what they are doing in Ukraine. But that is clearly not enough. We have to make it clear worldwide that doing business with Wagner means sponsoring terrorism and will have consequences. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks a lot, Katya. Thanks a lot. If you can stay, definitely that would be great. But as I said, as we know that you will need to leave. So, of course, it's sorry that it so goes at this time, but I hope that we shall see you now in our future discussions on this specific topic. Now I will pass the floor again to another national member of national parliament from Lithuania, Laurynas Kasčiūnas, who is chairing the National Defense Committee. And before that, I will repeat again that all the questions can be put on chat, and after all the speakers, we shall come to to the Q&A session. So now, Laurynas, please go ahead.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much for inviting. First time in this format, so very proud of it. So just what we did already in our parliament. So last month we drafted and submitted to the parliament a resolution on designated private military company Wagner as a terrorist organization, and this resolution was passed on March 14. As we know, resolutions are not normative legal acts, so it's not legal binding, but at the same time, it creates the direction what we should do national and what we should do on the European level. I will not tell and we will not talk about Wagner, group, but when we hear all these collected evidences and even witnessing what they are doing now in Ukraine, all that kind of killings, tortures, and repressions, sometimes I catch myself, we should not think about the resolutions, but to think about special operation forces, which could solve some problems directly with so-called organization. So, but anyway, we are doing in the Western way and in the democratic way. So I absolutely agree that we need to do more in European level to make the organization on the sanctions sanctions list. Of course, private military and security companies, so-called companies, are operating in conflict zone are a worldwide practice. But Western companies, they stick to the national and international obligations, and Wagner Group is doing in a absolutely different way, and it creates the instrument for Russia to hide itself, and we need that's why we need to call them as it is in the real words, in the real actions. But Wagner Group is a group which totally dependent on Russia. It's supported by Russian government. It's trained by security services, and etc. etc. Of course, what is interesting to see in public debate, even here in Lithuania, we see many articles now we're saying, look, Prigozhin is trying to challenge Putin. Prigozhin is creating some new power base inside of Russia. Of course, in analytical terms, it looks like interesting thing, but at the same time, it's a little bit riskier, because we are a little bit miscalculating, and now it even helping Putin to show what, look, I'm not so bad. Even people who are worst can be in the government of Russian Federation, and he can be like using this tactic of less evil, So that's why we should not be catched in such kind of situation. So Prigozhin and the Wagner Group is a structure of Russia, and we directly are saying in our resolution. As we know, most of them are not only ideological people who are gathered in this group, but also the criminal people who can act in a very brutal way. And of course, the idea of Wagner is to break the will to fighting of Ukrainian people, and their brutality is the tool to do it. But at the same time, we see that Ukrainians, are resisting and showing their force, and no step back. So it's, of course, I mean, for us, it's a big success. But Ukrainians with their patriotism, with their national identity, are the force which defends not only Ukraine but also Europe. And at the same time, the Wagner is very useful for Putin, but the losses of the people of Wagner don't care to anyone, and he's also using it very in a very clever way. At the same time, in looking from Lithuanian perspective, such kind of group as Wagner, because it's not only one group in Russia, there are more, but it's like a very well-known brand. They are capable to implement also limited scale operations. That's why when we are talking about NATO area, and what Russia can try to test how NATO operates, how collective security guarantees are operating and can be activated, the Wagner Group can be used for such kind of limited scale operations to even test NATO. That's why we said in our resolution in the parliament, but we should be careful on that, because now the line between the war and peace is blurring. So-called limited scale operation, some more sophisticated operation, can be done by such kind of groups, and Russia can try to hide, but that's why we are saying, look, we understand what you are doing. So on what is follow-up in Lithuania? Now I'm drafting the law of prevention of terrorism. I'm almost finished it with my advisors. It will be a national law, which would provide a specific criteria based on which the government or the executive body authorized by the government, for example, Minister of Interior, would draw up the list of terrorist organizations. If it will be adopted, I will start the legal process in autumn session. This law on prevention of terrorism will introduce a number of restrictions on individuals who are suspected or accused for participating in activities of listed terrorist organizations. So it can be not only Wagner, it can be more organizations, of course, what kind of restriction would come for the people who would be part of such kind of organizations. So, for example, in my draft law, there are such kind of points. Foreign national is considered to be a potential threat to state security, public order, or society, and is prohibited from entering Lithuania on that basis, or is deprived of a residence permit. Such a person would not be issued a permit of a weapon and would be deprived of it. Person could be prosecuted, and a criminal liability would apply for terrorist and terrorist-related crimes under criminal law currently in place. So I'm working on it. I will start the discussions. I will start the consultations with many experts here in Lithuania. We can do something also more internationally, even together with you. And I hope this law, national law, could be also be a good example for the other EU countries, or even for a whole of EU. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Laurynas. Appreciate for your information, what Lithuania is doing, and we hope that really you will succeed, and that will be a good example to everybody. Now we're moving to Peter Knope, who is counterterrorism expert and senior research associate from Clingendale. But besides that, I would say that he's an initiator of this seminar. At least he came with this idea, with the questions what we need to discuss. And that is why, Peter, really, we appreciate very much, and we are waiting for your really thorough explanation as where we are and what is needed to be done.
Thank you, and thank you for that introduction. I think this meeting is important for a couple of very simple reasons. First of all, we need to put and keep Wagner on our agenda. It's extremely important. We need to be talking about it, and we need to keep talking and exposing the Wagner Group, what they do. Secondly, it's time we act. We do something. We need to act upon it, and there's possibilities. There's something very concrete that we can do, and we should. Wagner is a political instrument. We know it as a private military company, but it's much more than that. It's a political instrument used by state structures, and it's comparable to what Hezbollah is to Iran. It's politicized. There's military in its name, but it's hardly military. It's much more than that. Let me explain. We know Wagner for the violence, but Wagner, where it's active, it works on intimidation and reduction of political space, killing of journalists, reducing the space for civil society to operate, limiting and silencing the voices of the public, including in sub-Saharan Africa. Number one, intimidation. Number two, propaganda. The organization is active, very active in propaganda. You go to Central African Republic, the propaganda of the Wagner machinery is everywhere. There's videos with the heroic acts of Wagner exposed to the sub-Saharan Africans. The propaganda is anti-Western, anti-French in Africa. And there's even a person called Kemi Seba, who tours Europe at the expense of the Wagner Group, who addresses audiences with a pro-Russian, anti-Western message. And he's touring in France, he's in Belgium is in the UK. Propaganda. Number 3, which is not very known, but the Wagner Group in Africa is frustrating the work of the United Nations, frustrating to the extent where the United Nations peacekeeping operations are being directed, are being bullied by the Wagner Group. When the United Nations arrives at the scene of an incident, it's the Wagner Group operationals who direct them where to go, what to do, who will get the food supplies, who will get protection, and who will not. So it depends on the opinion and the interest of the Wagner Group where the UN intervenes. Today, the transport from Central African Republic into the ports in Cameroon is guarded, monitored by the Wagner Group, although that is in the mandate of the United Nations. The United Nations in Africa is being directed and, how do you say that, managed by the Wagner Group. It's an instrument that's being used. Number 4, the economic activities. The Wagner Group looks for gold, diamonds, and mining concessions. They do this in Sierra Leone. They do it in Sudan. One of the groups that is fighting today in Sudan is supported by the Wagner Group. They're interfering into the security and the economic situation in Sudan. That's number 4. And then, of course, there's indiscriminate violence. Now, for those who think that the violence of the Wagner Group is undocumented, it's not. The United Nations Working Group on Mercenaries has extensively written and documented the atrocities by Wagner Group operationals. So it's all there. It's in UN documents, and and there's also a couple of human rights organizations that have done similar work. So it's all there. It's not that we need to invent the proof. If you add up the 5 points that I've mentioned: intimidation, propaganda, frustrating the United Nations, their economic, how do you say that? Trying to get a hold on the resources in sub-Saharan Africa, and the indiscriminate violence, that looks very much similar to what Al-Qaeda and ISIS do. It's basically the same thing. It's propaganda and violence. It's intimidating the public and frustrating the international peacekeeping operations, documented by the United Nations. So it's very similar to what Al-Qaeda and ISIS do. So it's very easy to see that the Wagner Group is in its essence a political, violent organization. Now we've got 20 years of experience in counterterrorism. We know what works and what doesn't. The military approach is hardly ever successful. So you need to do other things. Now, one of the more successful instruments in the toolbox of the counterterrorism experts is the CFT, countering the financing of terrorism. There's an organization in Paris, FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, that implements the toolbox, and it's effective, it works. The FATF monitors the implementation of CFT regulations in the member states. One of the CFT measures is that it doesn't only target the terrorist and the terrorist organization, but it targets the supporters and those who are actively engaging with terrorist organizations. So anybody who is a supporter who has a contract with a terrorist organization is also punishable under the CFT regulations. So it's time that we bring to call a spade a spade. I think my colleagues said the same thing. We should call a spade a spade. Wagner is a political instrument that uses intimidation, propaganda, and violence. To do this, we need more parliaments that bring the issue to the attendance of their governments. Today, Netherlands, Belgium, France, Lithuania are in that process, but we need more. The more parliaments bring the issue to the attention of their governments, the more political capital we will build. So it's important to take that initiative. It's important to bring similar initiatives to different member states within the European Union or beyond to build that momentum. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Peter. Definitely, that is what United for Ukraine is trying to do, to bring, common issues, common problems and solutions, to the attention of all our member states, and that is what we shall continue. Now we are moving to very special representatives from the project All Eyes on Wagner, who asked to stay incognito with the name of Lou, and that's what I can tell about the next speaker. So please take the floor, and
yes,
maybe you can.
Lou, can you hear me okay?
Sure.
So perfect. So hello everybody, my name is Lou. I am a member and investigator of the project All Eyes on Wagner. So what we do, and I will very quickly explain, is we are looking at the Wagner Group as a galaxy, and today we are trying to map out human rights violation which occurs. So we mainly worked on Mali so far. We are trying to map out entities because, as I can see in the chat, indeed there is no official Wagner company, but they are actually a galaxy of legal entities that are used today for paying mercenary salaries, but also commercial activities. We are looking at predatory commercial activities, and we are looking at influence operation, which are part and parcel of what the Wagner Group is doing. So today I'm glad to be here in front of you because as an investigative group, we would like to take it to the next step, and the next step basically is with you, is taking action, and is taking action to stop the Wagner Group. The first element I would like to highlight and bring to your attention is that we need to stop calling the Wagner Group a private military company. This is not a PMC. This is, as Peter said, really a tool of foreign influence for Russia. And part of his mission is not only to provide military services, but it's also to get access to international finance, is to get access to natural resources through very predatory means. And if you want later, I can enter into details of what it entails when they take a mine or a timber operation concession, for instance. They carry out violence on behalf of their clients. Today, we have documented proof of human rights abuses that have been carried out along with a national army of clients they represent. We have those evidence in the Central African Republic. We have those evidence in Mali. We have those evidence in Syria. And obviously, it's very documented now in Ukraine. So we want to stop calling it a PMC. In addition, they also carry out very sophisticated cyber operation with the goal of serving the governments that are employing them, but also the goal of reducing, I would say, media integrity in the places they operate. So this is really, really beyond a simple PMC. The second element I would like to highlight and bring to you is today, as an investigative group, when we carry out investigation, we have noticed a couple of elements that would benefit from a tougher regulatory action taken against the Wagner Group. The first thing is today within the Wagner Group, they do not employ only ex-security officers or personnel or ex-law enforcement personnel, but they do rely on a very big amount of civilian contractors. And we have come across contractors that have actually a very nice CV. Some of them have worked for, I would say, middle to big Russian companies, even for some foreign companies. And for some reason, at some point in their career, they decide to sign a contractual agreement with the Wagner Group at large and go and work for them, provide very niche expertise like geology, like being a diamond expert, like being a logistical expert, and they are sent in those countries and they contribute to the expansion of the Wagner Group. Today, we would like as investigators that when we reveal such names, there is a mechanism in place to really prevent those people for choosing a career with Yevgeny Prigozhin. That would be a very important step. The second aspect that we have really that is very material for us as investigators is today there is no mechanism to prevent their clients to go and sign a kind of big agreement with the Wagner Group. Today, we cannot go to Mali and say, Malian government, what you're doing is not right. You have signed with an organization that is not a PMC. You are actually fulfilling a foreign policy goal, which is the Russian foreign policy goal. So, and in those places, Mali, the Central African Republic, the rule of law is rather weak. And so it's very, very difficult, even when you have proved, human rights violations, or that you have proved that some mining titles have been acquired through concealed methods and with predatory means, you cannot actually go and defend such situation. Today, we have documented as well a very aggressive cyber influence operation in Burkina Faso that are put in place through kind of marketing companies that are financed by the Wagner Group. Today, there is absolutely no way, no means to go against that. As Peter was mentioning, the Wagner Group rely as well on sympathizers that are paid by them. Those people are, for instance, Kenny Seba, which is a Pan-African influencer, Nathalie Yamb. Those people are dual national. They do have a foothold in Europe, but they do operate in Africa, and they do participate to the expansion of the influence of the Wagner Group. Today, there is absolutely no mechanism in place to stop that. So the way the Wagner Galaxy has been built is really, they have been playing with such like legal gaps and holes to expand their influence and not able to be caught. When you look at commercial proceedings, a lot of those commercial proceedings, they use, smuggling methods, trafficking. They are actually diamonds, gold. It's sold in places where, again, the rule of law or the rule of international law, bribery act, that kind of thing is weak in those places. So there is no mechanism today to stop it. So this is really the message that I wanted to bring forward on behalf of my organization, All Eyes on Wagner, which is today, as we say in French, the ball is on your side, and you really need to catch it if you want to really deter and stop the Wagner Group. Happy to enter into more specifics if you have precise question on investigation we have carried out later on. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Louis. Thanks, Lou. And now we're moving to Matthew Jury, managing partner at law firm McHugh, Jury and Partners from United Kingdom.
So thank you for all for inviting us to speak today on this panel discussion. The U4U network is obviously doing incredible work, bringing people together from different walks of life and professions to ensure that we all can, in the most effective way possible, hold Putin's war machine to account. I come from a very specific discipline. I'm the managing partner of an international human rights law firm and public interest litigators, McHugh Jury and Partners. We've been representing victims of terrorism and lobbying governments for reform and advising on human rights issues for over 20 years. My partner, Jason, who should be here today, who I'm standing in for, although obviously I'm involved in the work that we're doing, is actually currently in Kyiv meeting with key figures in the Ukrainian government as regards the work that we're doing. So if we could explain a little bit about our work with civil society, which we're undertaking to hold Putin to account. Jason and the firm have spearheaded a Ukrainian civil society lawfare program, which includes the project Payback for Ukraine. The aim of the program is to enable and support justice for ordinary Ukrainian victims through opening a further lawfare front in Ukraine's fight against Russian aggression. And this would be through private civil actions. The program orchestrates and coordinates private group action, legal claims in jurisdictions around the world against all elements of Putin's war machine, and not against, I need to make clear, ordinary Russian people, but Putin's war machine and its instruments, which very specifically is the Wagner Group. And these claims have been brought on behalf of ordinary Ukrainian victims of the atrocities being carried out in Ukraine. It provides Ukrainian victims with free access to justice. The victims aren't required to cover any of the legal costs. And in return, all the claimant victims are asked to do is donate a minimum of 20% of their recovery to other Ukrainian victims that do not have standing to bring claims. This is via an initiative called Victims for Victims, which we've established alongside the Ukrainian government's United 24 organization. It's important to say that the program uses existing legal mechanisms and structures, so domestic courts, laws, and institutions to bring the cases and enforce the judgments. This means it's not beholden to political will in terms of setting up international tribunals, and the damages awards will actually reflect the actual loss and damage suffered by ordinary Ukrainians rather than some negotiated reparations, which ordinarily fall far below what is actually due to be paid. The program, I have to stress, is compatible and complementary, and actually, if it's coordinated properly, can provide benefits with not only the domestic Ukrainian criminal prosecutions, which have been discussed, but also international justice forums such as the Special Tribunal or Reparations Commission, platforms being set up with the Ukrainian government and international partners. What we hope to provide is a further route by which ordinary Ukrainians can simultaneously obtain accountability and reparations for the losses they've suffered, and working alongside the Ukrainian government and the international community, that the program can provide Ukraine with a further effective avenue for accountability and reparations. We currently have 5 cases in the pipeline, which are the relevant jurisdictions are the US, UK, and Israel. And we estimate the cumulative potential recovery to be around 200 billion. The program, it's important to stress, has got the full backing of the Ukrainian government. This was announced at a press conference in Kyiv late last year, in December. And since the middle of last year, Major General Budanov and the Ministry of Defense Intelligence have recognized the strategic advantage of the lawfare program and have been supporting it at the behest of the President's office. Budanov's team has also provided a supply line of background evidential material and information for the program's litigation. And we've already been recipient of very useful information and materials generated as a consequence. In fact, this is why Jason is in Kyiv this week, meeting with key members of the Ukrainian government to advance the program. You'll appreciate I can't go into details of who those meetings are with or where, due to security reasons, but that is currently where he is and why I'm standing in for him today. how does this all link to Wagner? I mean, I've already touched on it, but it's quite simple. Wagner has already played, obviously, a central role in the war of aggression and the illegal invasion of Ukraine. And it's been linked to horrific war crimes, including the targeting of civilians and children, torture, use of rape and pillage as weapons of war. It was Wagner who planted explosives around Zaporizhzhia, and it is Wagner that carried out many of the atrocities in Bucha. Not to mention recruiting some of Russia's worst criminals from prisons to fight amongst its ranks. Our focus here in London is to bring legal action in the UK against not only its founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who I should add, we've already been involved in litigation with. We represented Elliot Higgins of Bellingcat in proceedings here in London, in which Prigozhin was involved. So we have some experience of him. But these proceedings are being brought against Prigozhin, as well as various entities that make up the Wagner Group, on behalf of Ukrainian evacuees to England, of which there are approximately 180,000. And they are seeking compensation and just reparations for their psychiatric and physical harm and loss that they've suffered as a consequence of Wagner's actions. This case by itself has got a targeted recovery of 5 billion, and all of that to be returned to the Ukrainian victims of Wagner's actions in Ukraine. It's important to point out that this route enables us to circumvent issues of state immunity. Wagner does not benefit from state immunity provisions, and is therefore fully accountable for the harm it's caused. And moreover, what we also will be seeking to demonstrate in court, and seeking a legal ruling on the point, is that Wagner is indeed a terrorist organization committing acts of terrorism in Ukraine and elsewhere. We're confident that this can be demonstrated and proved in court, but its designation by Europe or other countries and international organizations would mean that there would be a much simpler pathway and an easier pathway in court to demonstrate this, to the extent it may well be taken even on judicial notice. And it would also avoid the need for our Ukrainian claimants to go through the traumatic process of having to prove this in court. For us, designation of Wagner as a terrorist organization would be a huge benefit to our Ukrainian clients and victims of Wagner's atrocities in Ukraine. But it's also absolutely necessary to call Wagner what it is and to hold it to account for its actions. Wagner is, by any definition, a terrorist organization which has committed terrorist atrocities across the globe. Indeed, I would go so far as to say it is the most serious existential threat to international security and stability that we're facing today. I'm telling those here today what they already know, but the importance of designation beyond the impact it would have on our program and projects would mean a travel ban would be imposed on those associated with Wagner. Assets would be frozen. EU citizens and entities would be prevented from funding and facilitating Wagner. It would also open the door for prosecuting those joining and recruiting for Wagner. It, perhaps most importantly, carries an incredibly strong symbolic function and can send a strong message not only to Russia, but also to those countries in Africa who may think twice now before continuing to collude with Wagner and its operations in their countries. The US has already taken an important step in designating it as a transnational criminal organization, but I think Europe now has an opportunity to lead the way in designating Wagner for what it actually is, and ensuring that the consequences for Wagner flow therefrom. So thank you again for inviting us here today to join this panel, and I'm obviously open and available to answer any questions that may follow. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. And now we're moving to Mykola Mursky, Director of Government Affairs from Special organization with a nice title, Razom, from the United States. So maybe you will explain, Mikola, what that organization is doing, and also, of course, on the topic.
Sure. Thank you, sir. So I work with Razom. It's a Ukrainian American civil society organization that was founded in 2014 during the Revolution of Dignity. Razom means together in Ukrainian, and that kind of summarizes what we do. We try to be a bridge between civil society organizations that are working on reform in Ukraine and those here in the United States. We've done quite a bit of work to try and push through the two pieces of legislation here in the United States that would require the Secretary of State to designate the Wagner Group as a foreign terrorist organization. That's HR 506 and S 416. There are companion bills on both the House and Senate sides. These bills, like I said, they mandate the designation as opposed to requesting or suggesting that it be looked into. They require the Secretary of State to designate the Wagner Group as a foreign terrorist organization. Now, the Secretary of State was given the authority to do this by Congress in the 90s. And so the State Department can basically unilaterally decide which organizations they are going to designate and which ones they won't. And when Congress gave the State Department this authority, and I realize that a lot of this is specific to the United States, but perhaps it could be useful in the European context as well. But when Congress decided to give the Secretary of State the authority to make these kinds of designations, they, in Section 219 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which is how this ended up going through, they listed three criteria. One, it must be a foreign organization. And in this situation, obviously, Wagner satisfies that criterion. Two, the organization must engage in terrorist activity or terrorism. And alternatively, they could retain the capability and intent to engage in these activities, which we certainly, based on our reading of US law, that criterion is also certainly satisfied. And the third component that must be met is that the organization's activities must threaten US national interests. And the current administration and the Obama administration have both issued executive orders declaring a national emergency pertaining to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and saying that the activities that are carried out in furtherance of that invasion do in fact threaten the US national interest. The US has also obviously levied extensive sanctions on the Wagner Group and other entities that are helping prosecute the invasion. And so meeting that third prong that needs to be met in Section 219, we believe that there's no issue on that front either. So generally speaking, the question then is, if these three criteria are met and the Secretary of State has the authority to make this designation unilaterally without action from Congress, why isn't the State Department doing it? And so we've had a number of meetings where we've asked exactly that question, both on the Hill to try and see what people have heard in Congress, and of the State Department directly. Generally speaking, we have heard that there's a reluctance to, the administration has basically said that they do not want to declare Russia a state sponsor of terrorism, although that is certainly something that we are pushing for, and we hope that they will change their minds on that. We're confident that they will, like as we see with a lot of weapon systems. And there is a certain concern that by declaring the Wagner Group as an FTO, that Russia would have to be declared as a state sponsor of terrorism immediately afterwards. You know, obviously we don't find that to be a particularly persuasive argument, not least of all because there's an internationally designated global terrorist organization in Russia that is sponsored by the Russian state, and Russia is not declared an SST. There is an IDUT operating in Russia, the Russian Imperial Movement. The second kind of counter argument that we hear is that the Wagner Group plays an important role in supporting stability in certain states in sub-Saharan Africa. And the United States does not. The United States is careful about causing more chaos there by criminalizing anybody who works with the Wagner Group. And I'm sure that there are folks on this phone call that are significantly better versed in this than I am. But I just think it's worth noting that those are the two primary arguments that we hear on the United States side about why people are reluctant to designate the Wagner Group. From our standpoint, we certainly try to make it clear to the people that we're talking to that it is very dangerous for the US to be relying on a terrorist organization to prop up a regime in any country in the world. And the Wagner Group is a terrorist organization, whether we call them one or not. So I think that it's important for us to also understand that the Wagner Group's threats are expanding, and they're not limited. So as we all know, in September of 2022, the Wagner Group opened up a new headquarters in St. Petersburg. They are establishing new mechanisms for recruitment beyond penal colonies. There's been reports that they're going to be recruiting Serbians, U.S.-trained Afghan special forces, prisoners in CAR in the Central African Republic, and others. They have expanded their illicit financing schemes to Hong Kong, Thailand, and elsewhere. And what we try to show in our meetings, what we try to demonstrate, is that this organization's malign influence is only going to expand, and the U.S. needs to act now to designate them to prevent that expansion.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Mykola. Yeah, and we're moving to our next speakers exactly. Now, we are joined by two prominent members of Ukrainian Rada, parliamentarians from Ukraine who knows very well what Wagner is doing on Ukrainian territory, what atrocities and crimes. So, and I will ask, first of all, Vadim Golichuk, a very active member of our network, and also he is leading co-chairing Ukrainian EU Parliamentary Association Committee. So, Vadim, please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrius. Thank you for the invitation and for arranging for this very timely, very important exchange of information, very useful information. So far, I see it about this very, very dangerous, not just this particular organization, but the tendency that we see here, where the Russians have managed to create this monster, which is active all around the world, as we now see. And it's not the only private military company in Russia, which has been created and connected, first of all, to Russian government and security services and military. In Russia, they have total about at least 10 such organizations which have different affiliations and connections. But obviously, the whole network is growing, and their goals and their intentions are quite obvious. Well, here in Ukraine, we have this very unfortunate and very tragic encounter with this group and with representatives of some other, which of course help us to understand how they operate, what it is that they want, and what it is that we should do in order to prevent them, to curb their activities and destroy them, hopefully eventually. So in terms of political decisions, we do see the political will growing. There have been, there's been these decisions, these resolutions of the European Parliament, which, as we were hoping, would give a very clear message to the European Commission to implement these political decisions. However, so far, as was discussed today, we didn't see that decision to name this group as the terrorist organization, and we hope that we will see that decision soon. Here in the Ukrainian Parliament, we did adopt a resolution recently in February calling for recognition of this, recognizing this group as a terrorist organization, and calling for other parliaments to follow the suit. And we're grateful to those who have done. Now, we also have tasked the Prosecutor's General Office with the specific assignment to create groups of investigators and to cooperate very closely with their colleagues, first of all from the international in the international community, making the exchange of the information available to different governments around the world, so that others know what is going on, know about the crimes committed by the members of this organization in Ukraine, and taking specific measures. We have also sent information that we have acquired about specific people and specific organizations, and we have defined over 30 people and dozens of organizations that are connected. However, we didn't see that information acted upon. So again, we're hopeful that the events such as this one and then further exchange of the information will bring us to the point where we will see these specific people and these specific organizations being put on the list of terrorist organizations, and especially in case with the legal entities. Obviously, the Wagner Group and others rely heavily on this network of organizations to finance their operation, to expand, and then basically conduct their activities. And it's not that difficult to hunt down those organizations and stop their activities, or at least limit them to the extent where it would become next to impossible for them. What we have seen lately happening here in Ukraine was this information campaign from the organization, specifically showing these hideous crimes with an obvious goal to, of course, to sow fear, but also we think they directed at creating this image for the organization that everybody should be afraid of them, everybody should realize how serious they are, but they're also trying to provoke Ukrainian military, and it's pretty obvious in some of these operations that they have conducted. And the recent information from Russian sources, where they interviewed former or acting personnel from these organizations, where very specific information was given about killings of civilians, children. Again, we see this as organized campaign that has many goals, which I have described. Therefore, we see the need to very intensive exchange of information, and especially the information that's coming here from Ukraine, because of how we are placed well, as tragic as this situation is, to collect a lot of information and exchange this information with our colleagues and friends. But we hope that they will act upon it. That's the only way to have this international campaign to bring the end to such organizations. And here I again make the emphasis that Wagner is not the only one. It's one of the most prominent ones, but we should be aware of the fact that this is the new hybrid strategy that Russia is using all around the world with these organizations. With that, I will stop. I'm fascinated with the discussion that is going on and the exchange of the information. And as I said, we will gladly exchange the information that we have, and hope for our dear friends, for your lobbying and your efforts elsewhere to help us achieve this result, designate them as terrorists and hunt them down. We're doing our part of the work here fairly well. The number of organization members that will stay in Ukrainian soil forever is growing by the day. but let's make sure that they are stopped everywhere in the world. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Vadim. Thanks a lot. And now the last speaker, but also very important, Vladimir Ariev, member of Ukrainian Rada, very active member of delegation to Council of Europe. So, Vladimir, please, floor is yours. Still, you are muted. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. First of all, I would like to stress that we have to understand what is the status of the Wagner military organization. This organization has no status. And their activity is just covering by the Russian governmental structures, but no official registration or permission or whatever, or licenses. This kind of military organization doesn't have. So, but at the same time, they are acting throughout the world. They are recruiting fighters and combatants from the citizens of South American countries, from Africa, from the Central Asia, and as well as we know, criminals from Russian prisons are right after the start of full-scale aggression against Ukraine. I'm researching and investigating this organization not the first year, and I personally have an evidences with the self-revelations of Wagner fighters and combatants who are talking about their operations in Syria, in in Eastern Ukraine in 2014, 2016 as well. But of course, it's only part of that, because the most horrible things they did during the full-scale war, full-scale aggression of Russia against Ukraine, and it contains sweeping the residential buildings and with the killing of peaceful population, the peace population, the regular citizens, including kids. They are making, for the last facts, they're making a pit for Ukrainian captives, and more than 50 were exploded by Wagners in that pit. And if you have seen the execution videos of Ukrainian captives, so the trail of Wagner presence in all of that. I don't know what, all that facts now are investigating in security service of Ukraine, and in a case if this if recognition of Wagner as a terrorist organization will be discussed seriously in European Parliament, the security service of Ukraine authorities told me they are ready to make a briefing for the group of parliamentarians who will be needed to visit Ukraine and to get the evidences on the ground. What I would like also to, what is really important to know, due to the status of Wagner Group, who will be compensate their so-called activity in Ukraine. If we can claim for reparations for what Russian regular army did, so Wagner is actually not responsible for anything. And this legal gap should be fulfilled only with one way. The recognition of terroristic organization means that all structures, despite the state or private, that are in contact with the Wagner Group should be sanctioned and cannot be recognized as well in the world. So the same as happened to ISIS, Al Qaeda, etc. So I do believe that this is the only way we can stop and beat out the ground from the Wagner Group organization, and with the following prosecuting every combatant who touch upon the membership, so-called membership in the Wagner Group in the future, and stop their activity throughout the world, because any kind of assistance to the Wagner Group after recognition as a terrorist organization will be condemned not only by statements but legally. So in this scope, I would like to stress that Ukraine Parliament have to go further, because in February we adopt the resolution which named the Wagner organization International Criminal Organization, International Criminal Group, but we need to raise their status up to the terroristic one. And I think that Lithuania in this case showed the very good example and start very important precedent for the following actions against the real terroristic organization. So I believe that this is not an easy way, but what I'd like to stress that if any designated group of European parliamentarians will be ready to visit Ukraine and to research more about the evidences. So Security Service of Ukraine, I've told about that to the chief of the service, and they said that they are ready to make a briefing for the parliamentarians.
Thanks a lot, Vladimir. Really, we shall take into account your proposal for us to visit, and to get more information from our security services on what Wagner Group is doing. Yeah, we came to the end of formal presentations of our speakers. Thanks a lot. Very, very important, very interesting. There are a few questions on chat, but I will add maybe in addition to what Dmitry Zolotukhin is writing a little bit about why United States are not putting Wagner Group into terrorist as terrorist organization and so on. But also he stresses again that Wagner Group is not a company; it's some kind of gathering or whatever. I don't know even how to call it. Like it was called by somebody like a galactic. So my question, I will start maybe from my own question to, I don't know who can help. Peter or Matthew as lawyers. So what really we need to do in the union, in member states? I mean, there's plenty of evidence what Wagner Group is doing, and definitely it's very clear that all those evidence is showing that Wagner Group is what they are doing. It exactly matches the description, international description of terrorism. But things are not moving ahead. Is that problem of procedures that inside of European Union member states need to have some kind of, first of all, a legal decision by the court on what? On criminal activities of Wagner Group, on the crimes what they did, or what is that? How that procedure is really should be implemented it back in European Union, if really there would be a political will to move forward. Or there is a lack of political will, like Mykola have said about the United States, that they don't want to to call Russia the state sponsor or state which is sponsoring terrorism, or they don't want to destabilize Africa, which is for me it's quite a I would call not very convincing argument. So, but back to European Union. So, what are the steps which we need to do next now? Can you explain us as politicians, not lawyers? What should we do? What we should ask our national governments? I don't know who can start. Peter, you can start. Yeah. Okay. Unmute yourself. Yeah. Still, you are mute. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. There's a complex procedure. It's more procedural than anything else. For the European Union as such has no procedure to put a organization on their list, on the European list. So the European institutions, Commission, External Action Service, or the Council cannot put a organization on the European list. Only member states can do it. So only the member states can bring the issue to the European environment. So we need one member, only one member state is enough. If one member state would bring the proposal to the European environment that we want to list this organization as a terrorist organization, then the European Union or the member states can agree. You need, how do you say that? Unanimity. So you need all the member states to agree with the proposal of one of the member states. That's the formal procedure. Now, one of the conditions, and that is very similar to what was explained to us by the person from the United States, Musky. One of the conditions for a member state to bring that proposal to European environment is that there is a threat to the national security of that member state directly from the organization. Now, this is the problem. Here we've got a problem, because what happens in Ukraine, what happens in Central African Republic, what happens in Mali, what happens in Sudan is not a direct threat to France, Germany. It's indirect, yes, but direct is complex. So here's the complexity. So the European Union cannot bring it to the agenda as a European proposal. A member state needs to do it, and the condition, one of the conditions is that there must be proof that there is a direct threat to that one European member state that brings the issue. Now, the question in political terms, what happens in Ukraine is obviously a security threat to all the European member states. So in political terms, that should not be a problem. In legal terms, some of the member states are reluctant in legal terms to bring that issue forward. That is where it's, that is the issue. If you allow me, now that I have the floor,
yeah.
On stability in Africa, I would love to have that discussion. I go to Central African Republic and Mali and Burkina Faso and Nigeria quite often. I'm a regular guest there. I would love to have that discussion with the State Department in Washington about the stability in Central African Republic and Mali because of the Wagner Group. That's an interesting position. I would fly over to Washington tomorrow and explain to you what happens in a reality check. Just invite me, I'll come, and I'll give you a reality check about what happens in Central African Republic in terms of stability organized by the Wagner Group. It's an interesting position. Anyway,
that would be very helpful. That'd be very helpful.
No, I will do it tomorrow. I'd love to do it. I'll give you a reality check.
Okay, maybe Matthew, Jury could explain us legal points or since you are in London, of course, you are not inside of the European Union, but nevertheless, maybe you know our procedures, how it goes.
Look, I can only reiterate, I think, what's already been said, that this is really a political decision. And in terms of whether there is, a threat, direct or otherwise, to European states, I would have thought the evidence points to the obvious conclusion that, as I said before, and I don't think it's hyperbole, Wagner Group is the greatest existential threat to our global stability and security that I think we've seen in decades. It's terrifying. This is to use the American definition, it's not only a terrorist organization, it's a transnational terrorist organization, which has got tentacles everywhere. And I don't think we've ever seen anything like it, actually. I think it's unprecedented in its scope and scale. So, look, I defer to those experts on European process and procedure. I am not one in respect of how that decision gets made, but it seems to me that it's an obvious decision, and any rejection of the suggestion that Wagner should not be immediately designated a terrorist organization, because that is what it is, it shows a lack of either political will or political expediency. And I think really we owe it not only to ourselves, but to Wagner's victims and those countries that it's currently active in destabilizing, to take a stand. So that would be my view in summary.
Okay, good. I see one of our active members from French National Assembly, André Gatolin, he put a question. Very interesting what Peter Knoppe just said on this, threat evidence. And André Gatolin is asking, is an attack on a French embassy could be considered as an attempt to French national security? Perhaps there are aware of some of those events somewhere in Africa. My point is very simple, again, to repeat. So if designation of the threat is the major condition for any member state to put to initiate to include Wagner Group into the list. So should we wait for Wagner Group to attack somebody in our countries, to initiate some explosions or whatever, in Lithuania? I see some kind of lack of logic. If you know that the group is doing terrorist job elsewhere, and you need to to prevent that group entering your countries, so you should do that before they will do something in your country, because you understand very well what is a threat. But I don't understand here our European bureaucracy and European logic. But can you explain a little bit more, Peter, on that topic of if the French embassy attack is an evidence of danger?
I think the answer to that question is very simple. Is yes. A threat to your embassy wherever is a threat to your national security. So the answer to that question is yes, 100%.
Yeah. Okay, good. And then I saw also quite many comments from Dmitro Zolotukhin, but also one question to our colleague from Watch the Wagner Group, or All Eyes on Wagner project, to Madame Lu. And the question was about more information about business enterprises, what Wagner Group is doing in Africa, entanglement with local business, mainly extracted from the ground. What are the measures that can be used to curb their access to the business activity using corporate accountability tools? So, yeah, Madame Lu.
Yes. So yeah. I think we need to distinguish two types of company. So the first type of company, they are often companies which are incorporated in Russia, and those companies, they have a multi-purpose activity and they are active, or they have effects in several jurisdictions. So I'm thinking, for instance, about two companies that are quite famous. One is Europolis. It's incorporated in Russia. It has effects in Syria. It has also been used for Libya, for Libyan operation. And in terms of what it does, it serves as a representative office in Syria. It's used to own oil and gas concession, and it's been used as well to pay mercenary. So we can see that he's actually active in the economic side, but also on the security side. And there are another one, which is very well known, but today not sanctioned anywhere, and it's Broker Expert. And Broker Expert has been instrumental in providing equipment to Wagner commercial operation in all Africa. So that's, I would say, the first category. Today, this category is badly addressed. First, because they are incorporated in Russia, and so it's very difficult to have access to them. And second, they are not all considered. So that's a bit of a shame. The second category of companies, they are companies that are local companies in African countries. So the ones that are very famous are, for instance, Lobaye Invest in the Central African Republic. Today, we know that each time Wagner is conducting commercial activity, they often set up a local company. So on those local companies, putting sanction is useful because we kind of win time, and it really disrupts their business. Often they have to recreate a company, they have to transfer share, and they are obviously flagged in many places. So that disrupts them. But what we know as well is that they use national straw people. So in most of the company they create, they're gonna put a director, which is a local director. That person is gonna change. They're gonna change the name of the company. So if we think about long term, it's very difficult to actually kind of cut the tentacles and stop what's going on. Today, there is a category which is really not addressed, and those are any support to logistics. So it means the bank in which those Wagner company are opening bank accounts. Today, those banks, nothing happened to them, and they are likely local banks. It means all the logistic corridor that they are creating. So today, there is a very well identified logistic corridor, and that's the Central African Cameroon corridor, with the Douala port being a key logistic node for Wagner. Today, nothing happened to that port, the company that are managing the port operation, or even shipping companies that are supporting the Wagner Group. So I think a good action could be to actually go and raise awareness with, the shipping company, the port managing companies, that kind of thing. We know as well that there is a second logistic corridor which is very important, and it's in Sudan. So there was some action that was taken by the US government to sanction one aviation company, which is again a key logistic company for Wagner Group. At least the EU should match that sanction, I think. And there is a third logistic corridor, which is less obvious, but quite important as well. It's Libya. And today there is little things that are done for Libya. So it's really to try to look at the problem from different angles and not necessarily go for the companies in itself, but really try to look at the ecosystem supporting the business, because on this, I think, international partner can actually have very good action and results. I hope it answers some of the question.
Yeah, Peter, yeah, please.
Yeah, can I add a small element to that? Because under the CFT, Countering Financing of Terrorism, regulations that are implemented, as I mentioned, under the FATF regime, which is monitored and checked by the FATF closely. Any bank organization that is somehow connected to working with money transfers or anything that is connected to a terrorist organization is being monitored by the FATF under the CFT regime. So once that Wagner Group is designated as a terrorist organization in the European Union, then the FATF will start monitoring banks all over the planet, all over, not just Europe, but all over, to see and to monitor whether any of these banks have financial actions that are related somehow to a terrorist organization. So under that CFT FATF regime, all those actions will be closely monitored. So the way to do it is to bring Wagner under the terrorist regime, which is then, CFT FATF. That's the system.
Okay, good. Thanks a lot. Really, our time is running. So I would like to thank all of you very much. It's a brilliant team of experts, and really we should keep in touch, trying to find the best way how to put Wagner Group on the list. I see here possibilities, but also some actions and activities, first of all, on national level. I hope that some of the countries can move and to try to test, the whole procedures in most effective, real way of testing, to see what will be the outcome. But in any case, definitely we have all the evidence what criminal terrorist organization Wagner Group is, and how they behave. So from that point of view, all of us, we need to mobilize our efforts, and not to stay only on the level of political statements or resolutions or declarations, but also, to put it into a real decisions by designated authorities. So we shall try to do that. We are, if you will have anything, to share, any kind of additional reports. I see, for example, Dmitro Zolotukhin, he is sharing his own organization report. An organization is NGO, Institute for Post-Information Society in Ukraine. Report on Wagner Group. You can see the link on chat. But definitely, I would ask all of you, all the experts, to keep us in the loop of information, and we shall try to follow, with our action, both in European Parliament and national parliaments, really to put to implement our clear political will to put Wagner Group on the terrorist list. So on that, I will conclude. Thanks a lot again. And let's keep our activities, let's keep our job, and all the sympathies to our friends in Ukraine. So good luck.